Welcome to episode 71 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I've been on some pretty bad vacations, but I feel like Tucker's was worse than mine.
and I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And last time I was in the woods is exactly the last time I will probably ever be in the woods.
You'll be in the woods one last time, but we'll talk about that later. So we got a couple guests today. John F.D. Taff is here, as is Matt Corley. Hey guys, thank you so much for coming on today.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
And why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a bit about yourselves?
I'm John F.D. Taff. I'm a horror writer, have been for the last 30 years or so. My most recent work was The Fearing, which was a serial novel that was released by Gray Matter Press last year in 4 novella installments. The gentleman who is also here with me, Matt Corley, has also become part of The Fearing because his company, Saturday Morning Scenarios, is getting ready to publish a novella that is part of the big story that is The Fearing. It's called The Fearing, Blood and Brimstone. There's going to be a Kickstarter campaign that starts in September, but I'll let Matt tell you more about that. Matt.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Matt Corley. I'm also a horror writer. Most of my writing is actually with RPG games, tabletop RPGs, writing for them and doing investigation horror type games. I have also written, I co-wrote a book with Sarah Tantlinger, The Devil's City, which was a tie-in novel to one of the games I run or I publish, which is Whispers in the Dark. And John's Fearing novellas from last summer kind of got the ball rolling on this. I mean, actually, James and I even had a conversation about some stuff, and I've talked to a few other authors out there, and I really love the horror genre and just kind of the way I look at it and the way I tend to write it. It kind of lends itself to doing it from a game perspective, an RPG type perspective, and so that's what we're doing. Pretty excited about it, actually.
Fantastic. So the Kickstarter is live now, correct?
Yes. So it's live. It's a pretty straightforward Kickstarter. My last one was Horror in the Windy City, which was the book Sarah and I did, and then also an RPG book that went with it. I made that one a little more complicated than I need to be. In my day job, I'm a pharmacist, and I do projects, and I unfortunately made it harder than it had to be, which I have a tendency to doing that. So this one's much more simpler. It is just the book, Blood and Brimstone. We're going to have options for international folks, which is really exciting. Actually, Gavin over at Kindle Reviews has already seen a copy, the hard copy, what it looks like for international folks. It's print on demand.
Nice.
So we have printer.
We love Gavin.
Oh, he's great.
Yes.
Yeah, we have 9 printers across the world. So it was funny. I was telling John and actually even Gavin got the book before I did. So Gavin literally got the very first hardcover book of it. And it was
actually, Gavin.
I know. He's like, I know. I told him to save it. It'll be worth $1 million. And
maybe when I'm dead.
I know. Well, we'll figure that out. Maybe that'll be our final stretch goal.
Work on that.
Yeah, it'll be our last stretch goal. Kill John.
To the woods with Don.
So the print on demand, though. So again, I mean, it's actually cheaper. It was cheaper for me to send it to Gavin than it is to send it to John, and John's 3 hours away. So it is very important to me on my Kickstarters to make sure that, my friends in Australia or England or Europe or anywhere else, they can get the book easily and actually easier than the people that are, again, 2 states over. So
that's really cool. Yeah. International shipping will kill you normally, man. It's so nuts.
It bankrupts companies. And I don't think folks all realize that. It bankrupts big companies because they don't realize it. And they don't understand that those rates change in a heartbeat. And I mean, I sent a book to somebody and I'm like, well, I just did it as a favor to a friend. And it cost me $100 to ship a 3-pound, basically a textbook size book to Mexico. And when he got it, he actually had to pay them another like $20 afterwards.
Wow.
UPS was like, we're not giving it to you. unless you give me another, $15 or whatever it was. And it's like, holy cow, it's wild. But
that's
anyway,
crazy.
That's not mailing.
No, it's so good that you have a way around that, though, because I don't know how many Kickstarters I see that I have friends in Australia or Germany, and they're so excited about them, but there's no international shipping.
Right.
And so they're just screwed, So it's great that you have that.
Yeah, that's something I've learned from the RPG side. I've run 4 Kickstarters, I think. And then I, like myself, and then been on 3, 4 others. Is kind of how, and that's the thing that the RPG world does pretty well, is we get books all over the place really easily, because it's really, it's just like all of us. We're micro publishers. I can't have 100 books sitting in my basement. That's not really an option for me. So the Kickstarter will be a one-time print run only, and I will order exactly as many books as I need. The printer tends to give me a little bit of overstock just because that's how they work, just in case books are damaged. Mm-hmm. But everything else will be print on demand from then on, because, I've seen and talked to so many folks that have that, if you have, again, let's say I sell 100 and I have 20 sitting in the basement. That's a fifth of my overhead.
Right.
Just sitting there doing nothing. And the margin's already thin. So I can't really spend an extra 300, 400, $1,000, whatever, a couple $1,000 on books and never get, or that don't get sold for 2 years.
Yeah.
Believe me, I know that feeling.
Definitely participate in the Kickstarter, so it's not just Matt ordering books for me, my mom, and grandma.
I did get them, though, for them. I did.
Good.
They do have their books.
So there's 3. There's 3.
Awesome. So, no, I want to talk about the book really fast, and I don't know how much I'm allowed to say or not to say, so I'm going to be vague, and then you can go above and beyond that if you want. So I read an advanced reader copy in ARC, and I absolutely adored it because, I love The Fearing anyway. Yeah. I was a huge fan of every single one that dropped, and I was super excited counting down. And I believe I threatened your life between books 2 and 3 that I had to wait.
Some mention of that.
And plus, I remember one of my favorite characters dying. I was very upset. Anyway, so...
You were right to do that.
Right? And so when I got this, I was super excited, and I had no idea what to expect. And The Fearing itself kind of jumps all over to these different people, and it's great because you get to follow all these different stories. And this one really locks in on a couple people who are super important in The Fearing. And I actually really liked this. I thought it was such a cool way to be able to build onto the universe without... You're not harming the original in any way. You're solely adding to it. And that's so rare when people do. I don't want to call this a prequel, but I guess that's what it is. It's the before story. So sure. And I really admired how everything in this book feeds those books in a really good way. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of authors can't pull that off. So I just wanted to say good job.
Well, thank you. When Matt approached me with the idea, it was originally an idea about adding the Fearing universe to the RPG game that Matt has got going. And there's going to be a little bit more about that, and Matt can talk about that when I'm done. But I think that it interested me because Matt had wanted to perhaps broach the idea of me writing something in addition to that. So we talked about writing a novella that would be in the Fearing universe, which led me to start thinking about, which direction you go in. I didn't want to do anything after, the story that I had told. So it would have to be something that would sit well within what I'd already written. And really the characters that leapt out were Jacoby and Tam, who show up at the end of book 3 and play a pretty big role in at least the first part of book 4, because they sort of just show up. So what Blood and Brimstone attempts to do is to show the reader what was happening to them at about the same time that all the events were happening in book 1. So it's sort of everything that was happening to Tam and Jacoby that was happening at the same time that the characters were experiencing stuff in the first book. Kind of a prequel, I guess, because we didn't get that story directly in the 4 books of the novella as they were released, but I think it dovetails pretty well in there. Plus, it's what I liked about it and what I set out to do was you can read this book not having read The Fearing. So this book could be an entree for a reader who has not read The Fearing yet. They could read this book first, then go into it.
I was actually going to mention that, but again, I didn't know what I could and couldn't say. So the one thing I want to say about that is I think that would be really interesting to talk to somebody that does it that way, just because of who these characters are,
right,
and how that would change your viewpoint compared to the view I had.
Right.
So I think that would be fantastic.
I told John I was going to try to talk my dad into it, and I don't think he's read. I'm pretty sure he hasn't gotten around to The Fearing yet, the 4 of them. So I'm going to have to bug my dad about it, because I know he'll run through all 5 of them in a week once he gets started.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if people actually take that a method of entering the story, and again, how they feel about those characters versus people who read the book the way that it was serialized and how they feel about those characters. So, but it was a fun exercise for me to dip back into that world, and I'm pretty happy with the responses we're getting so far for it. And Matt has produced I haven't seen the hardcover yet. Neither's Matt, but Matt has produced a softcover. The softcover version that I have is fantastic. It's a fantastic, very well put together with high production values. It's nice, great illustrations. We got a great cover by Francois Vaillancourt and interior illustrations by Stephen Coydle. So it's a sweet little novella package.
Yeah, and working with John was nice. I mean,
don't lie, Matt.
I know. Okay, well, working was nice, and we'll take John out of that. Well, we did a lot of different things with this book, and I know we'll get to Tucker and Dale, I promise, because I love that movie. But with the book, when John and I started talking about it, we took a little different approach than Sarah and I did, because Sarah and I wrote the book together. And the book that Sarah and I wrote kicks off one of the scenarios in the game. You literally go, basically, like D&D people and everybody that plays RPGs, there's a joke about how they write a 5,000 word backstory for their characters. Sarah and I literally wrote a 5,000 backstory. That's what we did. And so you got one that's illustrated. Sarah's an amazing author. I am happy to jump on her coattails and have her carry me along.
Absolutely.
And with John, we did kind of the same thing too. We did different, where we explored the world itself. And so, I've seen lots of folks like, Laird, Barron has mentioned it, Brian Keene has mentioned it. Weird Tales is doing it now, is doing RPGs. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do an RPG for an existing IP and or even just to adjust something that's already out there. And I think it's really interesting to do that, because it lets them get in the story a new way. And I think that's so much fun. So that was a tangent, but that was
what a good tangent.
So but that's what we're trying to do. Is we're just trying to produce some really neat boutique. It's definitely a boutique book. We're not, unfortunately, John, I'm sorry to break it to you, we're probably not going to see it at Barnes and Noble. Maybe I'll just take a copy and swap it in there.
It's the story of my career.
But we're producing some pretty. The books are beautiful. They look great. The art is fantastic. I have always said that I think that the indie writing, not just me, I'm coming to this late, but indie horror especially is as good as mainstream horror, and honestly, it's probably better in most cases.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so that's my thought. So.
One of the things, and I've said this on a couple episodes, but one of the things I really love about what horror is doing right now is novellas have gotten so huge. Yes. There was a time where if I found a novella, it was kind of weird. It was almost like, what is this little tiny short book doing over here? Right. Or they were all in collections. It was always, here's 4 of them because that's what Stephen King did. Right. And I love that it's becoming normal. And it even translates to film. Like Host came out on Shudder, and it was like an hour instead of the normal 90 minutes exact time. And it felt great. It was my cardinal rule of writing, which is tell the story that needs to be told and get the fuck out.
Right.
And as much as Stephen King influenced all of us, it's the one rule he never learned. Okay. And
but it's a good sweet spot. I mean, it's easy to keep a horror sensibility going in a short story. If you know what you're doing, it's a relatively easy task. In a novel, it's really hard to do because you've got that huge amount of room, and it's just hard to keep that feeling going. But a novella really gives you a little bit more room than a short story to stretch it out and build some characterization and story in there. But it also is short enough to really make you hone that sense of dread that works so well in a short story and kind of has you have more of a chance of letting it flicker out in a novel.
Right. It's funny you said that. So like movies, if they're getting longer and longer, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever. The books are getting forever. And it's funny because like I tend to look for, especially, my brain's done by the end of the day between 2 jobs, kids, everything else. I'm kind of finished. I do look at my books and I go to little book details because I read everything online on my iPad. Mm-hmm. And if I see 437, it goes a little bit further down the TBR than if it says 142. 200 or less is pretty good for me. And honestly, I like John, like you're saying, like I love probably 80 to 125, maybe 150. Probably my favorite size because I can read an 80-page novel in one night if I need. If it's good enough, like all of John's books, I read in one night. And the other thing is some of these books, when they're great, are so emotionally taxing. And Laurel Hightower, I'm talking to you. This is exactly Crossroads is great, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm still processing it. That is one of the most honest, brutal, and raw books I have ever read. And I know Laurel. I've talked to Laurel several times. She's so great. I just love Laurel to death. And as a parent with a kid that's gotten sick before, it's like it was hard. I would message her. I'm like, okay, I made 2 chapters today. I'm like, there's no way that book could have been 300 pages. I don't remember what our count was, but I bet it's around 100-ish. That's what it felt like. Reading it on a reader, but that's the other thing is you can't maintain that tension and those emotions for 300 pages. It's like
even if you could as a writer, I don't think you could.
I can't as a reader. Yeah, I can't do it.
I remember Pet Sematary, and not that King was able to do that throughout the entire book, but it was a novel-sized book, and I have not gone back to read it since I read it when it came out. Just because I can't, I literally think about doing it. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Yep. So I know what you're saying, and I'm looking forward to reading Crossroads. Laurel's great. She's great. She's a great writer.
When Laurel was on the show, I told her that it took every fear I had as a parent, and then it amplified the shit out of them and went, oh, you know what else you should be scared of? Right. And I was like, why did you give me new fears? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I can't imagine writing that. And I know how over the moon she is for her little boy, and he's little. I just can't. Yep. I can't even imagine. I can't put my head there.
Well, it's the novella form is really good, and that brings me to a nice little segue that I'll make is that one of the next projects I've got coming up is, I don't know if you guys saw the announcement this week from Tor, but I sold an anthology of novelettes, I guess is really what they're probably more accurately called Dark Stars to Tor Nightfire. It's going to be out next Halloween.
Awesome.
And it's going to be, it's pretty big. It's going to be edited by me, but we've got stories in it by the table of contents is fairly incredible. We've got stories from Josh Malerman Emma Katsu, Stephen Graham Jones, Caroline Kepnes, John Langan. I mean, it just goes on. And it's kind of a follow-up to that. You guys have read that anthology that came out in the 80s called Dark Forces.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of a seminal anthology back then. It had all the big names in it. So this is kind of a follow-up to that. What's even kind of nicer is that one of the people that had a story in that original one, Dark Forces, Ramsey Campbell, is also going to be writing the afterword for Dark Stars and a brand new short piece of fiction. So that'll be great.
Very cool.
But yeah, I think that novella, novelette format, that length, works just excellently in the horror genre. So I'm going to be really interested in seeing what these authors come up with for that book, and I think readers will too when it comes out.
I think the thing that I love most about it is, and this is coming from a writing point of view, not a reading point of view, when I write that length, everything that you guys already said about, the holding the tension and the horror and all that stuff, but the big thing for me is that in a short story, I lose that ability to make you truly, well, not lose, but it's a lot harder to make you truly care about characters.
Sure.
And the novella length, the novelette length, like you get more time with these people so that the tragedy hits you that much harder.
Yeah,
I really, truly believe that this is the sweet spot for horror, like you said.
I really do believe. I think you're entirely right. I mean, it can be done in short stories. Obviously, people have done it and done it to great effect. But the novella gives you a little bit more elbow room to be able to empathize with your main character. And that's the name of the game in horror. If you can't get the reader to empathize with the main character, whatever you're going to do to that main character is not going to register very well. So
exactly.
Yeah, I remember talking to or seeing somebody, it was either on the HWA Facebook or Twitter, who knows where, talking about how someone was having a super hard time doing short or even flash fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment was it's somebody that writes novels. And basically the response was, you need to remember it's a scene. That's it. No more, no less. It is literally, I mean, and that's how I like it from the RPG side, because that's how I write also, is I write scenes. So that's why I love the novella too, is, I can get, Sarah and I cranked out that novella in 6 weeks,
mm-hmm.
including editing. I mean, her and I just went back and forth. We traded chapters and it worked great. And it was enough time, even though it was 5 vignettes, to get some character stuff. But to your point, James, it's like, if I want to really put out a good story, I can actually, as an author or as a publisher, I can probably, crank out 4, 5, 6 novellas a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I can keep my name out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be perfectly blunt about it. I can keep, even if they're $2 a piece or $3 a piece, or if they're just all on Kindle Unlimited, which they probably would be, I can keep my name out there and people don't forget. And I think that's one of the great things about serializing. I mean, it's basically just serializing.
Right.
Even if they're not technically connected.
Well, my first big jump into the market was through novellas when I got my first Stoker nomination with The End and All Beginnings, which were 5 novellas. And then 2 of my upcoming projects are novella-based. We're doing Thunderstorms Books is doing a hardcover limited edition of something called Midnight Land, which is a 4 novella partnership between me, Josh Mailerman, Eric T. Johnson, and J. Daniel Stone. It's a follow-up to I Can Taste the Blood, which Gray Matter Press put out a couple of years ago. And then I'm working on a cosmic horror novella collection right now that I'm probably going to be working with Bob Wilson at Nightscape to bring to market. This one's called All the Stars Die One by One. So I really like that. I really like the novella format. I really like short stories too, but novella is just such a great format.
Look, I've talked to James a number of times about this, and he told me, he's like, novella is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because my confidence started getting hit, because I'm like, oh, well, this story is only, I think it was 35,000, maybe 40,000 words.
Right.
And his question was like, did you tell the story you needed to tell? I'm like, well, yeah. It's like, you don't need to add anything.
Right.
And that was all I needed to hear, as well as the comments here about, I don't need to write that 300-page book or a 100,000-word book in order to get the point across. I just need to establish who's there, establish what happens, and then tie it all together.
Yeah. I think you're right, Don. I think a lot of writers are in your position where they feel like they hit about 35, 40,000 words, and they're thinking, oh man, I got to write a 500-page paperweight, or no one's going to buy this.
Right.
And then they put it aside. But yeah, you're right. I think you've got that. You're right in there in that sweet spot. So don't be discouraged at all.
No, and I think go ahead, Don. Sorry.
I was just going to add. I feel like you could also finish that and then maybe read it over and go, oh, I could do this whole story about this, and it's still going to get longer. Like, it really just comes down to my rule: write the story that wants to be told and call it a day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think, Amazon is what they are, right? They are what they are, for good or bad, evil or good, whatever. But KDP and Kindle Unlimited have absolutely given, I'm a huge Kindle Unlimited fan. I've been doing Kindle Unlimited for years. Mm-hmm. That's where my books are. That's where John's will end up after we finish doing our thing. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, though, with Kindle Unlimited, I pay $8. I can read 30 novellas for $8. Whereas, and that's why one of the reasons I think novellas are out there is because I don't care about the overhead anymore. And I tell that to people when I do print on demand versus actual print, like offset printing. Mm-hmm. When I'm doing print on demand for my RPG books, I actually don't worry about the paper or the page count too much. And I tend to go high because I'm not actually paying for the paper or the cardboard, that I'm not paying for the cover. I'll do all the other stuff, and that's fine. And when, again, we're doing novellas, just putting a cardboard cover on 5 pages is still like $2. So there's no market there. Again, this is me talking about basically from my day job position, but I think that's why we can do these ebooks or with these novellas. And like you said, you can make a collection when you've got 6 of them, or, S.H. Cooper just did hers. What is it? All That's Lost or Fear, something like that. And it's her short stories. I keep forgetting to ask her where she published them all because they're really, really, really good. And you had to do them in one off. I even read Joe Lansdale maybe did it. No, Bob Pastorelli did it. It's like 40 pages. It's a Western. It's a horror Western on Kindle Unlimited. It's fantastic. And I could just jump in. I read it in the evening. I'm like, okay, well, I definitely have to buy some Bob's books now because he's not on Kindle Unlimited, but now I got to buy some books. But anyway, that's sorry. There's a tangent. I can talk all day, as you guys know.
Don't worry, we're going to. We still have a whole movie to cover.
We haven't even talked about Dale and Tucker and the Preppies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go over then. Unless anybody has anything else they want to add, which is fine.
Nope.
Anybody?
I'm ready.
Cool. All right. So Tucker versus Dale. Tucker versus Dale. Really? Hey, great. New movie right there. Tucker and Dale versus Evil. When I first heard about this, I was instantly sold. The big thing for me has always been communications. I got my master's in English communication, right? Like, communication is huge to me. And making that the central theme of this film just blew my mind because it really pointed out how many films, not even just horror, are based on this very concept, and we don't even talk about it. So I just wanted to throw that out before we even start because it doesn't really fit any particular spot so much as it's every single scene is about miscommunication or proper communication.
Yeah, I think I watched it on Netflix maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, first time. And it's funny because I was actually trying to explain to my partner. So I'm originally from Alabama, and I know at least one person on this phone call is from the South as well. And I'm sure there are other people that have been there as well. And I think I could not explain to her, or she didn't realize the difference between a good old boy and a hillbilly and a redneck.
Right.
And there is a big difference. Like,
huge.
Tucker and Dale, those are good old boys. There's not a thing wrong with those two guys. And the frat boys are, of course, assholes and all sorts of other things too, or at least the one is. But I don't know. I'm totally changing subject again on it. But with this movie, I have a very stressful job for day life, and then I have one of my girls who's great, but she's still we have treatments and stuff, and some days are better than others. And I mean, I don't get it. I don't get through a day without a pretty high level of stress by 5, 6 o'clock. And I tend to not watch TV because I can't focus on it. Honestly, I just don't have the brain for it. I always have the brain for Tucker and Dale, though. Always. I've probably thrown that on the background and just had it going on while doing other things once or twice a month since the first time I watched it. Because, again, it is actually a great movie. I will say that. And like you said, it's a lot more to it than just, again, Tucker and Dale. And the antics and over-the-top gore, and honestly, it's hilarious. But there's that too, and that's something too. It seems like sometimes when we watch movies that actually do have a really good or a little bit of a deeper meaning, sometimes they're not fun. I mean, for lack of a better way to explain it. And, this is one of those movies that does a really good job of doing both, which is pretty uncommon.
Right.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think the communication and the script itself is why I come back to this, because the dialogue changes based on who you watch and what you think about how they're communicating. Mm-hmm. Like, if at this time, Chad really stuck out to me. And I don't think I've ever really paid attention to the things Chad says before, but like, he is so aggressive if hillbillies are even slightly mentioned or anything about them. So like there's one part where somebody's running towards him and they're like, the hillbillies. And he's instantly is just like, which hillbillies, like just so he's like just instant like that. But it's also just like his aggression with Allison, just everything about him. And then looking at it from, and anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I'm very anti-Trump and that I say a lot of bad things. So I just want this to be my opinions here, everyone. I see a lot of shit online that really fits Chad. And it's amazing watching Chad today, because obviously this was not based on that, and seeing that every day online. When I'm seeing people defending Kyle Shitface McFuckface or whatever his name was. and I see Chad 100%. When Chad's giving that there are no rules, we can do whatever we want. That's what I see. I see that same sickness, for lack of a better word. And it was really interesting watching his communication from that point of view. And then it's like that with everybody, though. Like whether it's how Tucker and Dale talk to each other or how Dale interacts with Allison, just each person's communication is so different. And if you go back and watch this, everybody, I just want you to really pay attention to how characters change their communication, even based on who they're talking to. Mm-hmm. Because long story short, that's what brings me back to this. It's why this is so real, because we all do it every fucking day. And they did an amazing job with this dialogue.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I think communication is such an important part of doing a comedy that works. And I will say right now, prove me wrong, this movie is a hillbillied up, whored up version of an I Love Lucy episode. Okay. With just rampant miscommunication and doubling down on mistakes. And it really did. As I was watching, I was like, this is Lucy. They're Lucy and Ethel. Tucker and Dale are Lucy and Ethel.
That is amazing. I love that.
Because everything is built on the misunderstandings and the miscommunications and, on both sides. But really, I really looked at Tucker and Dale as Lucy and Ethel.
Those aren't grapes they're squishing. No, that's a really good point. I hadn't considered that. Now that's what I'm going to watch when I watch it again.
Well, all right. And, this is Chad before there was kind of air quote Chad. And this is Karen. I mean, this is pretty far ahead of its time, actually, if you look at it that way and think of it that way. I mean, I always feel sad I feel bad for Chad Lutzke whenever we hear somebody say, well, Chad, in that kind of context, because we know some nice Chads. But yeah, it's like you said. I mean, this is Karen, but this is 11 years ago.
Right.
This isn't. They were pretty prescient on. And forward thinking on kind of the way they did it. Again, it is a very smart movie that you don't have to be very smart to enjoy. And I'm okay with that a lot of days, because some of my evenings I'm not very smart. I'm happy to just sit there and see something silly.
Well, I got to piggyback off of what Matt was saying earlier, as far as three different types of people or country folk that you run into in the South, because that is one of those problematic things that we see in films. Where there's not that distinction that's represented. Right. But if you're from those areas or grew up in those areas, you know the distinction between a redneck, a good old boy, a hillbilly, or just plain country.
Yeah.
You know who is who. Good old boys are they can have a beer with you and hang out. The Southern rednecks are the ones that you got to worry about being true fucking assholes in some cases.
Yeah.
I said, but you can have country boys that are rednecks, but you can't have rednecks that are good old boys, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You can have those guys that are good old boys, but can be racist, but you can't have rednecks that are good old boys as far as hey, we fought for our heritage and we did it. But, you can have a few of those country, a couple of those good old boys that are awesome guys to hang out with. They'll play football with you. They'll hang out, have beer, but they still might have some hang-ups about some things. Right. They're not going to be an asshole to you about it. But I've been around a good number of those people. But I love that it starts off with that because when you first see Tucker and Dale, they got cut off by the college punks.
Right.
And then they pull up and you immediately think, oh shit, these guys are going to be the killers. They're going to do this. If you're not paying attention to the title, because the way that Dale is looking, but Dale is looking at the girl and he's like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. She's so hot. Right. As opposed to, you fucking college punks, I want to kill all of you and run you off the road. Which is, kind of that setup where you see how the college kids are so scared that something's going to happen. But I love the setup of pulling you in, going with whatever your preconceived notions are, whatever your prejudices are, and getting that flipped, from comedic devices like Dale carrying a scythe when he's going to talk to Allison. And not realizing he's holding one, to the real fear that they might have as far as how somebody's looking at them,
right?
And what some people might not know. I mean, this was supposed to be based in West Virginia, but what some people don't realize about some parts of the South is sometimes people just look at you to kind of figure out who you are and what kind of conversation they can have around you, or just if what the fuck are you doing? God, you got your polo shirt, the collar turned up. What the hell are you doing here? But it's not out of harm. It's kind of it's okay, well, let me look at this strange new thing as opposed to I'm going to ostracize you for being a strange new thing.
Right. I think the way that it, the whole film is one big setup after another, one big setup and then, undermining of that setup, which is fantastic. And not just from a, undermining it from a comedy standpoint, but undermining it from a horror standpoint. You're expecting it to zig one way and it goes another.
I do like what you said, Don, about how, the first time you meet Dale, he's sitting, you can hear the banjos in the background, even though they're not actually playing, because he's just staring the girls down, or that car down, and they go past it. And the next time, like you said, he's sitting there, it's so great because you hear him and Tucker talking, and they're like, "Well, we got a vacation home. Tell them about the vacation home. That'll impress girl." And then Tucker comes up, Dale comes up, and he looks like the Grim Reaper because he's got a side neck on. He's holding it right there. He's literally in the position of a Grim Reaper and scaring the ever living shit out of this girl. who's already scared because Chad and whatever else has already kind of gotten her on edge to basically, insinuate or say that, everybody here is out to hurt you or kill you or whatever else because they're all just bad people.
I'm the only one who can save you.
Right.
Well, then what the fuck did you bring me here for? Now, one of my big things at the beginning is that part where she's grabbing like the bug spray stuff, and then Dale's on the other side just like staring at her, and then he's like, oh shit, and like tries to act natural. It works so well for comedy and horror, and that's the big takeaway from this is the writers Eli Craig and I think Morgan Jurgensen, they just did such a great job walking that tightrope in both genres and really bringing this together. And obviously, I wrote Fat Camp, so I'm a huge fan of horror comedy anyway. But I feel like this movie hits it on a level that most can't. Well, and they can't do it. And yeah, go ahead.
It's very similar. I've always thought that horror was very similar to comedy in that, as a writer, of horror, it's always a battle with me, with spelling too much stuff out and making sure that the reader gets it, and giving just enough for the reader to go on to get what's going on in the story. And I think that that's very similar to what a comedy writer has to do. You don't want to hit the audience over the head with the joke, but you've got to give them enough to go on it. So it's always this battle between, have I shown enough? Have I shown too much? Have I not shown enough? So I've always thought horror was very similar to comedy. And I think that people, writers that get comedy usually get horror and vice versa. So this was a great exercise in that. I think that melding those two together, the horror world and the comedy world, works really, really well when you've got somebody who can appreciate both. Because, and then on the other hand, if you've got too much comedy in a horror, it can dilute the horror. But if you've got too much horror in the comedy, it dilutes the comedy. So I thought it was the film as a whole was a really great balance on all of that. So it worked for me.
And I think that it also just never takes the audience for, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't treat the audience like we're not smart.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to overly spell things out, like you said, but it also doesn't give us the obvious joke.
Right.
Like, even when we know that all of these kids have a suicide pact, no, I'm just kidding. Even when we know that all of these kids are randomly dying on the thing, and we see the fucking wood chipper, we know the joke.
Right.
We know the joke. We know the horror, right? They're the same thing. We know the payoff, and they still twisted it enough to make it fresh.
Yep.
Because it is that diving, it's the move, it's the going over Alan Tudyk into this thing. Like, you kind of, I don't know about you guys, but like, I'm expecting the setup to probably be like a little scuffle and he falls in or something like that. And it's just immediate, which makes it so much better, horror and comedy wise. So I guess my point is just like not treating us like we're dumb, keeping it fresh, and just hitting us with that added twist. Because one of the great things about comedy and horror is playing into what the audience expects it to be and then taking it to another level.
Right.
Well, just thinking too, like you said, we've got, they've been to the gas station. They've left. Next thing that happens is they get pulled over. And, they're drinking, of course, and they're kind of freaking out about, Tucker and Dale are kind of freaking out about having beer in there. And the cops just looking at them, just like, what the hell is going on? And, you've got Tucker being the talker because he's the slick one. And he's like, well, we're just, we're going to be fishing. And it's like just me and my buddy having some time and striking out with the ladies and just kind of making all these different kind of comments that from his perspective mean what they mean, because we've seen that. And you can just see the cop the entire time just getting more and more confused and more just thinking these guys are up to something bad. And just like, what the fuck is going on?
And just being nervous around the police, around the sheriff,
Right. They were terrified.
All this weird shit is happening, right? And now it's, well, the how do I explain anything that's going on? To the point where someone could possibly understand this and make it seem like, because even Tucker's I'm sorry, not his excuse, but his explanation of what's going on doesn't even make sense to himself. He's like, oh my God, this kid just jumped in here. Oh, by the pants, I can tell it's one of the college kids, which by itself, I sat there and laughed. I was like, how you can tell it's a college kid from the pants.
Right.
You're not an ID. I didn't see his face, anything like that. It's like, yeah, this is definitely one of those college kids. Like every joke.
If he would have had like yoga pants with like ASU on the butt, then you could understand it then.
Well, that would be now. That would be if it was, that would be if it was done 10 years later. Because this is 2009. I was actually in Phoenix in 2009, I think. No, I'd moved by then. Okay, never mind.
I'm still here.
It's hot, isn't it?
It's always hot.
But it's fun to see their perspectives and everything too. Because again, I think probably I loved it when they walk into that cabin, and it's Dale that says that there was an archaeologist that must have lived here. I think.
Right.
Because there's skeletons of animals on the floor. It's like, and then just like, and you see all the different things, like, they almost get hit by the board that comes down with the nail and just all sorts of stuff. I mean, those two have that kind of slapstick, almost just barely missing getting maimed constantly throughout the entire movie. And of course, those poor college kids with the pants, they get all the bad luck to even it out.
But to go back to the police officer really fast, even when he comes back, I love that Tucker does the exact same thing. He's so scared to talk to him, and that consistency is just fantastic.
Yep.
That's like the best part of the entire movie. That might be one of the best, like 15, 30 seconds. Like, we have had a doozy of a day. That is the best. If you can find that GIF, just put it on your social media. Just keep doing it constantly, because that is the best part of the entire movie. That's probably the best 2 minutes or whatever that is.
Well, I guess all the confusion, I shouldn't say all the confusion starts with this scene, but the major point of confusion starts when Tucker and Dale are out fishing, which even then, when they're fishing, there's still this discussion of like, oh, we could do this.
Right.
And it's Dale trying to be the best friend possible. And I could see this conversation happening with a father and son, couple of brothers, really good friends, co-workers, where it's kind of like just this monotonous, normal conversation that's taking place. And then, oh, there's a girl over there. And just from them being out there, it's kind of like, we don't want to be creepers, but I kind of want to look. I mean, she's hot. Do I not look? Do I look? And it's one of those things that you think of, and not to say that they have that adolescent mindset, but it's one of those things out of that human curiosity of, I want to see what's going to happen next.
Right.
Not necessarily she's going to get naked or anything like that, but hey, man, she's kind of hot. I want to at least check her out. And they both startle each other. She falls, hits her head, and all of her friends see them rescuing her, but they're assuming that they're abducting her.
Right.
And Tucker, again, all the comedic bits worked for me, because when Tucker says, "Hey, we got your friend," it's one of those things that you don't think about it when you say it, as far as how it's going to come across. It's him saying like, "Hey, don't worry, we saved her." It's "Hey, we got your friend," and they're sitting there like, "Oh, those fucking hillbillies got Allison," and they all run off. And when she wakes up, Dale, after their little interaction, they explain, "Hey, we rescued you. You hit your head on the rocks out there, but your friends all ran away for some reason. They left you."
Well, it's funny because, Dale especially is incredibly innocent and naive.
Oh, yes.
Right.
I mean, really, they both are. But that's it too. It's like, the first guy you see that you think is the killer is as far opposite as you can get in that spectrum. Because again, how unassuming he is, and really is so naive and everything. It's like he couldn't even imagine these things being taken the way they are, or the situations that they end up having.
I was just going to go back to what Don said about We Got Your Friend. And I think that would have been a great title for this film. Like, if they didn't go with the title that they have, We Got Your Friend would fit this so well. Anyway, that's all I had.
That's great. So they have their friend, and she wakes up. And that was a really kind of a fun scene, too, where, she realizes that Dale is actually really smart and really self-conscious about it. And, he comes in with the pancakes, and then he's immediately thinks she hates pancakes because she's terrified. It doesn't even come into his mind that she's like, I woke up in a strange bed, and this, this good old boy in his flannels and shirt sleeves torn off, and, a hat is walking with this food with one little flower, I think, was in it on the cup of water and stuff. That's it. I don't know. You just go back and forth so much on this, and it's so much fun that they do. They just kind of keep you moving, with the scenes and how everything goes back and forth so fast.
I don't know about you guys, but You Hate Pancakes totally gave me the same feel as one of my favorite Steve Martin moments.
Yes.
In The Jerk, with
I know you're
he hates
say.
these cans.
Yes, he hates these cans.
That was the same feeling I had. Oh my God, you hate pancakes.
Should have brought waffles.
Always.
The waffle shop is the waffle irons in the shop, Don. So yeah, and then he brings her more breakfast, and I love how he's like, "Please don't tell me you hate eggs and bacon."
Well, even the attention to detail, he puts like little flowers there for her. It's reiterating the point that Tucker's made a few times about, like, you're a sweetheart, you're a sweet guy, you're really nice. And that attention to detail, for the character, for the writing, like, let's make sure he's not just giving her breakfast. Like, he's bringing it to her with a flower, something that's gonna, let her know that he's a nice guy, or at least not to be feared.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Tyler Labine does such a great job playing Dale, by playing that naivety, and there's the. Where she's like, "What, you were spying on me?" He's like, "No, what? Wait, what? No, no." And we were just out fishing, and then, like we already said, like, your friends ran off in the woods for some reason. They just left you. But don't, and he even defends the friends. He's like, "Don't be mad at them." He's like, they just aren't good in a crisis, I think is what he says.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he apologizes for not having any girly clothes for her because she wakes up in like a flannel. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's funny. Tyler does a great job. I mean, Alan obviously Tudyk is great too. But I really, really enjoyed watching Tyler Labine go back and forth, and just, it can't be easy to play somebody that nice and innocent and like I said, naive, I guess, when you're wearing dirty, nasty old clothes. And you got a trucker hat that's been run over 30 times and all that stuff. I mean, he's a pretty big. I mean, he's. I don't know if he's actually a big guy, but he's not a little man. I mean, and he just plays that so well. Like, kind of pulls himself in on himself.
So this scene where he's talking to Allison is nice because we get the straightforward theme. She directly says, "I believe so many problems are caused by a lack of communication."
Yes.
And what's great about it is it doesn't feel forced. It totally fits, but it lays it out for us. But the bigger thing for me, because, I'm always critiquing writing, is what's happening around them as this is happening. Because outside, Chad is going full ballistic chattiness. And it's such a clear example of what she's talking about. And I love that these two scenes are so close to each other. He's out there doing it's us versus them, survival of the fittest, there are no rules. And everything that he is saying is based on exactly what she's said. And this works so well for me because it points out how They are clearly not the couple that's meant to be. And it also shows us what she's probably looking for. And as a fat kid myself, I'm going to just tell you, like, nobody believes that Allison should end up with him. That's not how society works, right?
Right.
And this gives us a reason for it, makes it completely plausible, and makes us pull for them more. Because no matter what, we think we're going to have those biases. And I love that this fits so well to encompass the entire film, plus build that relationship, slaughter the other relationship. I mean, this is a solid fucking piece of writing right here to me.
Well, and that they had the courage to follow through with it till the very end. I mean, a lot of movies would have undercut it at the end, with some, they were pulled apart by society at the very end there. But no, they committed to it and stuck with it, which I gave them credit for.
And then they carve, we have your friend in a log.
Mm-hmm.
No, we got to back up for a second because my favorite death scene happens when Tucker is chainsawing the wasp nest.
Yes.
This is my favorite scene. Maybe not the most solid piece of writing, which I believe is the sheriff that we talked about earlier.
Right.
But that scene where Tucker is just wielding the chainsaw in every direction, running around the house. Oh my God. No matter how many times I see this, I rewind this scene every time and watch it at least twice.
I just like how whenever they're saying they're like, college kids, and then like, are you okay? Like, no, there's like half his body's gone. Yeah, he's not okay. Oh my gosh, I think the death scenes are just better and better and better every time. Each one is each one's a trope. You got a wood chipper, of course. You got the punji stick or punji, whatever they're called, the stick, like basically the wood spear that goes to the guy's chest, and then and then the fly like lands on his eyeball. I mean, just like kind of just little stuff like that, which is just so much fun. And I mean, it's funny too because Allison even tells them once her and Tucker and her and Dale have all kind of figured out that they should all be nice, and I mean, she tells them flat out that my friends are judgmental.
Right.
I think the funniest one for me, though, probably is when everybody's actually in the cabin and you've got let me see, who else? How many people died in that in like 30 seconds? We had somebody went up in flames.
Well, 3 because Chad makes it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have 3 because you have, I forgot her name, I guess Naomi, the one or Chloe, whichever one was smoking. The one girl had her face cut off with the weed whacker.
That's a great shot too.
And then Jason caught on fire. Oh my God! As soon as he caught on fire, second grade came back to my head as far as fire prevention. I'm sitting here thinking like, stop, drop, and roll. And I can't remember if it was Tucker or Dale said it.
Yes.
But as soon as they said that, I was like, holy shit, just gold. Gold. It's like, you gotta stop, drop. That's not good, man. You gotta stop, drop, and roll. Just how calm they are. This guy's on fire.
While their vacation home is burning.
Yeah.
He's crackling like a log. Oh, I love that.
Well, and I mean, again, I know we're kind of going all over the place in the movie itself, but I mean, you got when Dale and Allison are digging a hole. I'm digging a crapper hole for a shit house, for a crap house. It's nothing for, and yet he just gets so he gets so flustered. And while he's having that conversation, her friends are watching saying, he's sick. He's making her dig her own fucking grave. I mean,
right.
And that's when the first kid, I think, goes into the wood chipper,
Yeah.
He jumped right in. It's a suicide pact. And that's where it gets off. Is that, Tucker and Dale are absolutely convinced that these kids are out there killing themselves all over their property for no reason at all. And they need help. And that's just like, they're scared shitless too. This entire time.
And what's also great about that whole scenario, just starting with Allison and Dale being out there digging, is that she immediately says, "Can I help?" or asks if she can help. And he looks at her, and it's that same thing about that prejudging someone, or at least misjudging who they are. She just lets him know, like, I grew up on a farm. I'm not like the rest of my friends. I grew up on a farm. I did this stuff. And Dale then seems, at least from my estimation, he becomes so much more comfortable with her and understands that, oh shit, she's not she's not out of my league, and she's kind of cool. Like we can have stuff that we can talk about. And at that moment, you get this understanding of, as an audience member, as a viewer, that we make these judgments all the time, right? And I'm sure that all of our viewings of Allison change once it's revealed, oh yeah, she grew up on a farm, so that's probably why she didn't fit in with her group. And that's probably also why she understands even better, like having to have a mask around people. And I guess not to miscommunicate or trick anybody, but the idea of, I'm not going to tell them all this shit about me because my friends are very judgmental. If I tell them I grew up on a farm, I'm going to have to hear like pig fucking jokes or something, or any type of incest remarks, because I grew up on a farm, so that means that shit must be going on.
It doesn't.
No. I mean, as far as it's guaranteed that it must be happening as soon as I mention it to them. Because with like any good friends or even just occasional friends, there are jokes that you'll make with each other, but you don't want to give someone too much room to make a joke about something,
right? Because
then that door is opened. But what did either one of you think about at least this I don't want to say it flipped, but I guess this reveal with Allison to Dale, in the midst of all this turmoil that ends up taking place within the next 5 minutes, if that.
Yeah, I think it works on the level that flipping assumptions, which the movie is just rife with. Now you've got the characters in kind of a meta way doing the same thing. So I think it works really, really well.
I love that. Well, I just love everything about it, honestly. But I also like how we still get another scene where she says, let me find it in my notes. They must have thought you were trying to hurt me. And he says, why would they think that? And then she stumbles and he goes, no, you know why? Just say it. And what I like about this is that's the obvious one to go to, right?
Yeah, right.
But going back to what Dale said, like how he changed when he found out that she'd been on a farm and stuff, I like that it's every single fucking person in this that has this problem, because that's how life is.
Exactly.
I'm a super liberal dude, right? But I still have my biases and I still have these preconceived notions or believe in stereotypes or different things, because that's reality. And it's not that we can't have those things. It's what do we do with them?
Right.
And not to get too preachy, but no, so bringing it back, I love that we get all these different sides. And I like that Dale doesn't see himself having that. Like, he doesn't notice this farm thing changing him.
Right.
But he definitely sees the hurt he feels when she says that her friends might think that he was trying to hurt her.
Right.
Well, the thing is, she can't even defend Dale because of all that confusion of what's going on and the carelessness, and also the idea that Dale is probably feeling a little bit elated that they're hanging out and talking and doing all this other stuff, and of course digging the shitter hole. Right. That he gets approached, or at least when the guy's running towards him, he turns and does an awesome slapstick move, which is hits her in the head with the shovel. Yep. Because he's turning his attention to where he hears the sound, knocks her out, and now you can continue on with this confusion because she doesn't know what's happening. And she could easily be one of these people at that moment that would have shut all this down and said, what are you doing? This is my friend. He rescued me the other night, and I mean, it wouldn't make for a great movie at that point, but just the idea that at least the writing of this takes care of that.
Well,
okay, we were
again,
together,
it's like I Love Lucy episode.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's so fun. Like, again, we're kind of when Allison, like you said, Don, Allison had the opportunity to kind of shut it down, and then now she's pulled out of it. And by the time she gets a chance to do much, there's only one person left anyway, and it's Chad, who's crazy.
Right.
Absolutely insane. So again, I think they do such a great job of it. And again, it's just in each conversation that, Dale and Tucker end up having with somebody, especially somebody outside, you can just see how confused they are the entire time by the entire, just by what everything that's going on. They just have no clue what the fuck's going on, with the suicide pack and, when the fighting actually ends up starting, and they're like, well, we have cooler,
Oh my God. We have beer. You can take the beer.
Yeah, we have some beer. They're on ice. I mean, it's like, and at that point, everybody's just completely just caught up from Chad's antics, because Chad just gets everybody whipped up into this, like, kind of this terrified frenzy. And, I think the only time we ever see even Tyler even get Dale even get mad is when he's worried about his dog.
Yeah, exactly.
And that he gets upset then.
I kept thinking about through this whole movie, you better not touch that damn dog.
This would not be the movie where the dog needs to die or has to die. I mean, it was too
such
cute.
A slaughtering of Dale's innocence. That would just be.
Oh yeah,
Jesus, that would be worse than almost anything else you could do to Dale.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And as a horror writer, I like punishing my characters, but I would feel fucking horrific even considering that.
Well, I mean, and even after that, you've still got Dale looking at and trying to make excuses on maybe it wasn't really them. I mean, he even says, well, maybe something's going on with them, or what are they going through, or they forgot to take their medication.
Yes.
He's still trying to figure out what the hell it is. It's like, surely nobody actually acts like that or actually thinks those things and does those things. I mean, why would they kill my best friend and my dog?
Well, and I mean, even when a kid is aiming a gun at him, he tries to be helpful.
Right.
So he's still not buying into the realities. So, yeah. Now, I do love how saving the dog leads to Tucker being captured.
Yes.
I really like the fact, if you sent me Don's fingers, please don't anybody do this, but if you sent me Don's fingers cut off, my first reaction would not be, oh, his bowling fingers? Like, that's how innocent he is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
well, at least he got him back at the end. I mean, they may not have been his.
Right, exactly.
But he did get back fingers.
All's well that ends well.
Right.
Does this one look weird to you? But and I love when Tucker's hanging upside down in the trap, and as Dale gets closer, he's like, "It's a trap! It's a trap!" And then, the trap hits and barely misses Dale's lower region there, and
hung like a bear.
Yeah, because he's not hung like a bear. That's exciting. No, but this again, like the consistency with the characters is so great because they're in this dire, terrible situation. One is hanging upside down, having had his fingers cut off. Who knows what other kind of torture he's been enduring. And they're both giggling about a dick joke. It's fantastic. And it doesn't feel weird. Like it just fits,
Right.
Well, I think that's about when you start hearing where they actually start talking about, like, that's actually when Allison tries to talk Chad out of it again.
Right.
And then, but immediately he says, I think maybe it's probably one of the girls that says that, it's Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
And that there's no possible way these two guys could actually be nice. It's just not possible. And that she's falling in love with him. And then, of course, Chad goes off at that point.
I love that. That's so great because he's like, "You're falling in love with him?" No. And she tries to just logically break this down, and he will not hear it. Like, he's latched onto this thing and he's just going off. And this brings me back to my point about Chad earlier, with the internet trolls today. Like, I feel like it's the same thing. It's, you can present any information to me, but I heard this crazy random piece of shit over here.
Right.
And so that's all we're going to talk about.
Or they use that conspiracy theory as a way to, argue against facts that you have that are supported by evidence.
Right.
Well, that whole little
true.
Well, that whole little exchange is so surreal where, again, he stops immediately his ranting when he hears Dale call Allison Allie.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he realizes there might be some sort of personal thing. And then,
right.
He yells at, yells at Dale, and then Dale yells back at him, yells back at him. And then somebody's like, well, how about we have tea and talk this out? and how about some sandwiches? And it's just like, again, we just keep going back and forth. It's like, it is such a surreal fun, and it's always funny. Like I said, they've done such a great job of the way they've structured it, and with the delivery and with the actors doing such a fantastic job that it's always funny, and you can always understand how they got there. Nothing seems as forced as it probably should. Because, I mean, honestly, right now we're talking about, one guy is hanging upside down with a finger cut off, tortured. And, the other guy just barely missed getting his, genitals like pierced by a booby trap. And they're talking about, well, maybe we should have some tea and some sandwiches and just kind of figure this out. We can work this out still. But it still makes sense in the movie because that's just the way that character has been the entire time.
Right.
And it's such a great way to set up the end of the film as well. But we'll get there.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Even if you two leave, Don and I will get there. No. But yeah, I don't know, man. I love everything about this. I think this is such a masterclass in writing, and I think more people need to see it and read it, like read the actual script if you're going to get into this sort of thing, because I do feel like this is just literally a masterclass in what we're doing.
It's on Netflix, I think. It always is, it seems like. So that's where I always find it.
Right.
That's where I watched it.
Yeah, that's where I watched it.
Yep.
All right.
And I think, I mean, in our next set of scenes is kind of when Chad starts to try to explain why he's a nut job. And that's kind of when we get back to that, we've got those little kind of, I don't know, kind of almost reminiscent of other horror movies where, Jason is his mother's all messed up, or, Crystal Lake and everything else. And, Chad's trying to explain what the problem is and why it's okay, or, kind of justify his whole situation. And this whole time, Dale's like, I didn't do that. That wasn't me, and then Tucker's like, he can't even hook a fish, and again, we still see Chad is just so completely like unhinged and set in his mindset that he's just can't even hear it, can't even fathom it.
And that's a really good representation of how stereotypes work and prejudice. It doesn't matter that it wasn't you. You fit the description in my head. Not even the description that's out there. The description in my head.
Right.
And I mean, I don't think that you can get more on the nose with it than this. The other thing I like about it is that it's a total preconceived notion that relies on a lie. Because we find out that what Chad has believed all this time about himself isn't even the fact. And so this absolute hatred and this prejudice and this burning rage are all based on bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such beautiful social commentary in today's world.
Right.
And I'm sure it was at the time as well, but holy fuck, it burns right now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was probably just as bad back then.
Oh, I'm sure. It's yeah. Don, what do you got on this?
Well, no, I was going to say with Chad, I guess realizing what he is, or at least the story around him being alive was a great thing to include. And I love the way that Allison actually, I guess, presents it or responds to it, which isn't, hey, this actually didn't happen to you and your family. This didn't happen the way that you know it as. She gets in this I guess, short explanation. Dale's holding the paper, and the statement is, "You're half hillbilly." And just the absurdity of the statement but then how the humor behind it, because it's not like, hey, this is your real father. He's the one who did all this stuff, or whatever else was going on. It's you're half hillbilly. It is almost as if that would piss him off more than knowing the truth about what took place. You're half hillbilly. Because imagine, if you're in a privileged position like he is, I mean, despite his parents believing that his father had been murdered and his mother being committed, he seems as though he was raised in a very privileged home or privileged upbringing by the way that he conducted himself, the way he acted. But then again, it could have been an act on his part to deal with some type of insecurities that he had, which probably does anyway, because he has this fake alpha male shit going on.